Howdy, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you like the video. Please note, this video contains violent content which may be too intense for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Now back to the story. A young man with striking purple eyes awakens in an abyss of emptiness, confusion washing over him like a tide. Where am I? Or rather, who am I? He murmurs, his voice echoing into the void. His mind is a blank slate. No name, no past, just an overwhelming sense of loss reflected in his light-skinned face. Glancing down, he sees his hands are shackled, heavy chains clinking with every slight movement. The stripes of his prisoner's outfit make him look like a living zebra, a figure trapped and marked. Driven by a desperate instinct to survive, he begins wandering aimlessly through the endless, desolate expanse. Hours pass. At least, they feel like hours, though time seems meaningless in this place. Exhausted, he gasps for air, his energy depleted. How long have I been walking? He wonders, sweat trickling down his brow. Then, in the distance, he spots something, or rather, someone. Relief surges through him, and he runs toward the figure with hope rekindled. But as he approaches, his hope turns to horror. Before him lies the lifeless body of an orange-haired girl, her stomach gruesomely torn open, blood splattered across the ground. Terror grips him as he stares at the scene, his heart pounding in his chest. Where am I? What kind of place is this? He whispers, his voice trembling. But then, as if a switch is flipped in his mind, the fear and disgust vanish, replaced by a chilling numbness. A hand suddenly rests on his shoulder, and he spins around, his movements sharp and defensive. Standing behind him is a man with piercing blue eyes, dressed in the same prisoner's attire. "Did you do this?" the blue-eyed stranger demands, his tone cold and accusing. The purple-eyed man, caught off guard, shakes his head vehemently. "No, it wasn't me," he stammers, panic rising. The stranger narrows his eyes, scrutinizing the scene. "There's no way you did this with bare hands," he mutters. The purple-eyed man, now desperate for answers, asks if the stranger knows where they are. But the blue-eyed man shakes his head, frustration evident. "I don't remember anything either." "And chains? What chains?" He looks down at his own unbound hands, perplexed. Suddenly, a mechanical voice cuts through the tension, echoing around them. Participants identified, the voice announces as two pieces of paper float down from the sky. The blue-eyed man shouts, "Who's there?" While the purple-eyed man cautiously picks up one of the papers. It reads, Reiyan Asura, 19 years old, in search of his older sister. "Is this me?" he wonders, a sense of unease settling in. The other paper reveals the identity of the blue-eyed man. Cho, 35 years old, married, father of 3. Shock and confusion grip Cho as he processes this information. "What the hell is this? I don't remember any of this," he yells, his frustration boiling over. Before they could fully comprehend the situation, the mechanical voice interrupted once more. "Weapons provided to participants," it announced. Almost immediately, Reiyan and Cho felt a burning sensation at their necks, and to Reiyan's shock, a red sword materialized in his hand. The voice continued with an ominous tone. "You have 5 minutes to execute your opponent." Reiyan's heart pounded as he noticed Cho now, wielding a pair of sharp sai. The voice then added, "Should you fail, your suit will release an electrical current that will end your life." Fear began to set in as Reiyan stared at Cho, who appeared just as terrified. "This can't be real," Reiyan whispered, trying to make sense of the situation. Cho, his voice strained with urgency, pointed to the dead girl's body and yelled, "Look around! This is no joke. They erased our memories and trapped us in these suits. I have a family. I can't afford to lose." Despite the tremor in his voice, Cho's determination was clear. Reiyan quickly realized that he had no choice but to defend himself. As they engaged in combat, Reiyan noticed something peculiar. Glowing strings of light seemed to emanate from Cho, almost as if they were guiding his every move. A voice inside Reiyan's head urged him, "Survive," as he narrowly evaded Cho's attacks. However, one of Cho's strikes landed, slashing Reiyan's leg and causing him to stumble in pain. Desperation surged through Reiyan as he saw Cho preparing for a final, decisive strike. His mind raced, and then he noticed one of the glowing strings pointing directly at Cho's neck. "It's him or me," Reiyan thought, the voice in his head compelling him to act. With Cho just inches away, Reiyan moved with surprising speed, countering Cho's attack with a slash to his neck. Blood splattered, and Cho collapsed, pleading for mercy. Reiyan, now focused on survival, tightened his grip on the chains and ended Cho's life. Breathing heavily, Reiyan stood over Cho's lifeless body, a cold emptiness settling within him. "Why do I feel nothing?" he murmured to himself as he tucked Cho's paper into his pocket. "I need answers, whoever did this. I'll make them pay." Suddenly, a brilliant light descended from above, and a figure bathed in a radiant purple aura appeared. The figure's voice resonated with authority as it declared, "Participant 305081 is the victor, Reiyan Asura." Reiyan, overwhelmed and bewildered, looked up at the figure as it introduced itself, "I am God." Forced to bow before this celestial being, Reiyan's mind was flooded with questions. "So, this is what God looks like," he thought, his heart racing as he faced the one responsible for this nightmare. The figure, exuding an overwhelming sense of power, gazed down at Reiyan with a mix of amusement and indifference. Reiyan, trembling from the recent events, recalled the fight he had just endured. Yet, a strange sense of satisfaction began to well up within him. With a slight, almost chilling smile, Reiyan looked up at the figure and whispered, "It felt good." God's amusement grows as a smirk forms on his lips. "Your mind betrays your words," he remarks, his voice echoing with unyielding power. Reiyan, adrenaline still coursing through him, demands, "What is this place?" God, unfazed, responds, "This is a realm of my design, crafted specifically for this game. 2 million souls were brought here." The weight of this revelation crashes down on Reiyan. Millions, like him, forced into these brutal trials. Desperation drives Reiyan to question further. "Why can't I remember anything? Why was I chosen?" God's answer is chilling. 2 million souls. One game. One wish. His gaze, eerily similar to Reiyan's, locks onto him as he continues, "In this game, only one will survive to claim the wish. The rest will perish." Reiyan tries to ask more, but finds his voice silenced, his throat constricted by an unseen force. God, with a casual raise of his hand, commands silence. "Do not interrupt," he warns, his tone leaving no room for defiance. With a mere flick of his finger, Reiyan is forced to bow lower, powerless against the deity's overwhelming presence. God continues, boasting of his omnipotence. "I created the universe and all within it. I spare one wish for the victor of the God game. One will claim it, the others will fall." Frustration boils over as Reiyan shouts, "Why? Why are you doing this?" God's reply is devoid of any warmth, for entertainment. The cold truth of the situation hits Reiyan, realizing the cruel nature of the game he's now a part of. Unfazed by Reiyan's distress, God adds, "As you progress, you will uncover more about the game, about me, and about yourself. Your sole purpose here is to survive." With that, God vanishes, leaving Reiyan alone with countless unanswered questions. Suddenly, he's transported into a room filled with other participants of the God game. The chains on his wrists are gone, but the unease remains. As he surveys the room, he notices everyone is dressed in the same prisoner's garb, their faces reflecting the same horror and confusion he feels. Among them, he spots a child, and the stark realization sets in. Each one of them has taken a life to be here. Reiyan clenches his fists, a newfound resolve hardening within him. "If I'm to find answers, I must survive this twisted game. And that means everyone here is my enemy." He understands that in this survival game, the weak are the first to fall. "But I killed Tenjin," he thinks. "Doesn't that make me strong?" Just then, a robotic figure approaches, its movements mechanical and unsettling. "Are you ready for the second round?" it asks in a grating, artificial voice. Reiyan, startled, nods slightly. The robot introduces itself. I am Mr. Yura, the facilitator for the next round. Reiyan, more fixated on the fact that the robot has no mouth yet speaks, yells, "Where the hell are we?" A typical bully among the group interrupts, telling Reiyan that questioning Yura is pointless. They've already tried. The yellow-haired man, identifying himself as Yuran, sizes up Reiyan, curious about his story, but Reiyan, still dazed, has no answers to give. Yuran, with a sly grin, mutters something about God telling them all the same thing and introduces himself. I'm Yuran. Let's hope we get through this together. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierces Reiyan's chest, as if he's been struck, but there's no visible wound. What's happening? He wonders, panic rising. Yuran, noticing Reiyan's discomfort, smirks menacingly. What's your name? He asks, but Reiyan, sensing something is off, grows suspicious. Is this magic? Reiyan ponders, remembering God's overwhelming powers. If powers like his exist, maybe. But before Yuran can push further, a masked man steps in, interrupting Yuran's bullying. Yuran, playing innocent, backs off, claiming he was just testing Reiyan to see if he was a worthy partner for the next round. The masked man, unamused, tells Yuran to find someone else. Turning to Reiyan, he says, "You'll be my partner." Reiyan, taken aback, wonders why the masked man would choose him, especially when he hasn't displayed any special skills. Introducing himself as Takeda Shinjin, the masked man shakes hands with Reiyan and urges him to move quickly to the next round. As they walk together, Reiyan asks, "Why did you choose me?" Shinjin's reply is calm and calculated. "Because your eyes, they look just like God's." Shinjin continues, "Everyone in this room is hiding their abilities. In the God game, everyone is an enemy, but I decided to break that barrier. I need to trust someone, even if it's blind trust." He pauses, then adds, "But if you become a liability, I won't hesitate to cut you off." Reiyan, stunned by Shinjin's honesty, realizes that this partnership might be his best shot at survival. This guy, he's too honest, Reiyan thinks, as they prepare to enter the next round, their fate hanging in the balance. As they enter the next round, a blinding light spills into the room, revealing a hot chick and an old man standing before them. Reiyan quickly sizes them up, thinking the old man shouldn't even be in a game like this. Shinjin, ever cold and calculating, turns to Reiyan and asks, "Which one do we kill first?" The old man tries to initiate conversation, asking if they know what this round is about, but Shinjin cuts him off, warning them not to take another step. The old man, ignoring Shinjin's warning, introduces himself as Jiren, and the chick reveals her name as Sarah. Suddenly, the room is bathed in a radiant golden light, and a voice echoes through the space, "Welcome to the second round, participants." The air feels charged as another figure, resembling Yura but with a more authoritative presence, materializes before them. The figure begins to outline the rules of the next challenge. Each team must possess a ball that grants 1 point for every second it's held. The game will stretch over 15 intense minutes, with the team holding the most points by the end declared the winner. However, there's a dangerous twist. If the ball drops, everyone in the game will die. The voice adds this ominous detail with a chilling calm, underlining the gravity of the situation. Anything is permitted to win. With the stakes clear, Sarah wastes no time, instantly summoning her weapon, her eyes filled with determination. Reiyan, however, stands confused. Everyone else seems to know how to conjure their weapons, but he's never been taught this vital skill. Sensing his unease, Yura glances at Reiyan and comments with a touch of intrigue, "Interesting. If God chose to hide the rules from you, it's not my place to interfere." The words linger in the air as the game begins. Frustrated by the constant twists and feeling as if the game is rigged against him, Reiyan curses under his breath. Every round has thrown unexpected challenges his way. Meanwhile, Yuran, eyes locked on Jiren, the elderly man, charges forward, intent on securing an easy kill. But Sarah intercepts, her weapon clashing against Yuran's with a fierce resolve. Reiyan, observing Jiren's frail appearance, assumes the old man must be the weakest link. Driven by this assumption, he launches an attack, declaring, "The ball is mine." But Jiren is no easy prey. Instead of retreating, he commends Reiyan for his bravery but warns him against rushing in unarmed. To drive the point home, Jiren thrusts his staff forward, unleashing a burst of flames. Reiyan, in that split second, sees the familiar strings of light, his unique ability to perceive paths of opportunity. Realizing that sacrificing his arm could lead to victory, he roars with determination, pushing through the flames and landing a powerful blow on Jiren's face, sending the old man crashing to the ground. Yet, despite having the upper hand, Reiyan hesitates. He decides to spare Jiren, opting to take the ball instead. As the adrenaline courses through him, Reiyan's latent power becomes clearer, his ability to sense and exploit opportunities, almost as if guided by an instinct to kill, gives him a significant edge. But Shinjin, looming over Jiren's fallen form, isn't as merciful. He demands that Reiyan finish the job, his tone leaving no room for debate. However, before Reiyan can act, Sarah seizes the moment, using the distraction to her advantage. With lethal precision, she drives her weapon into Shinjin's back. Reiyan barely dodges her follow-up attack, quickly realizing that her speed is beyond normal human limits. She must have some special power of her own. Despite Reiyan's best efforts, the battle takes a turn for the worse as Sarah lands a crushing punch, sending him sprawling across the arena. Dazed and battered, Reiyan clutches the ball, his mind swirling with confusion. The paper he read earlier, about a sister he doesn't even remember, the people he's fighting, the incomprehensible prize they're all struggling for. It all seems so meaningless. He looks over at Shinjin, who, despite being injured, stands unfazed. Reiyan wonders if any of this is truly worth it. As Jiren struggles to his feet, he makes a desperate plea for Reiyan to surrender the ball. But just as Jiren reaches out, Shinjin springs into action, pulling Sarah's weapon from his back as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Reiyan can hardly believe it. Is he for real? He thinks, astonished by Shinjin's resilience. Watching the unfolding chaos, Yura, ever the spectator, questions Reiyan's motivations. Why do you fight? What drives you to survive when you don't even know what you're fighting for? He asks, his voice carrying a tone of genuine curiosity. Still clutching the ball, Reiyan feels a sudden clarity. He realizes that he's searching for something, anything, to give his life meaning. He needs answers, and the only way to find them is to survive. Fueled by this newfound resolve, Reiyan suddenly bolts from the arena, sprinting straight toward the edge, fully prepared to leap into the unknown. Reiyan's actions were desperate, bordering on reckless. As he jumped, aiming to end the chaos in one decisive move, Sarah's quick reflexes kicked in. She grabbed him just in time, yanking him back from the brink. "If you're going to die, do it without the ball, you fool," she exclaimed, her voice a mix of frustration and relief as they both caught their breath. As they sat there, panting, Reiyan couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. He asked Sarah, "Why do you want to keep fighting? Why do you want to live?" The question was heavy, loaded with the desperation they both felt. Sarah, however, wasn't ready to share her reasons. She snapped back, "Why should I explain myself to you?" Her irritation was clear. She wasn't about to expose her vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, Shinjin, ever focused, moved swiftly to deal with the weakened Jiren. With a decisive strike, he ended the old man's life. As Jiren lay on the ground, his life slipping away, he managed to mutter his last words to Sarah, "I let my guard down." His voice was filled with regret, the weight of his missed opportunity heavy in the air. Shinjin, with his usual cold demeanor, turned to Sarah and remarked, "You should have finished him when you had the chance." His words were blunt, devoid of any sympathy. Enraged by his indifference, Sarah launched herself at Shinjin, attacking him with all the strength she could muster. Reiyan watched, realizing that every move Shinjin made was part of a calculated plan, a plan that he had foreseen. As Jiren's life faded, he spoke one last time, revealing his fear. He talked about the children he would never see grow up, the wife who had passed away years ago. But as his life ebbed away, he admitted that none of it mattered anymore. The game had stripped away all their hopes and dreams, leaving them fighting for survival, driven by the primal fear of death. With only 3 minutes left in the round, a voice echoed through the arena, announcing the remaining time. Shinjin, still holding the ball, stated with certainty, "It's over." Sarah, realizing her dire situation, screamed in despair. "Am I supposed to just give up?" Her voice was laced with fear and frustration. Shinjin, ever the realist, suggested that giving up might be less painful than whatever fate awaited her at the hands of the game's creator. Sarah, knowing she was out of options, realized that her only chance of survival was to take down both Shinjin and Reiyan in the final minutes. But just as she moved to strike, Reiyan, thinking quickly, managed to block her attack with the ball. The impact was severe, shattering his bones, but it saved his life. The resilience of the ball impressed him, and he wondered about the power behind its creation. As the final seconds of the round ticked away, Shinjin offered Reiyan a hand, pulling him to his feet as they prepared for the next challenge. Reiyan then revealed to Shinjin that he had figured out Sarah's power. "She controls the wind," he explained, using it to enhance either her speed or strength, but she can only use one ability at a time. This insight could be the key to surviving the next round, giving them a crucial advantage. At a critical moment, as the tension in the arena peaked, Shinjin observed, "That's a tricky power to deal with." His tone was thoughtful, as if he was already planning his next move. Meanwhile, Sarah, her emotions overwhelming her, looked at Yura and asked, "Why are you doing this?" "I don't want to die." Her voice was filled with a quiet desperation. Reiyan, feeling a pang of sympathy, was about to comfort her, but Shinjin's sharp voice cut through the tension. "It's not over yet. We've got 1 minute left." His reminder was a harsh reality check, underscoring the unforgiving nature of the game. Sarah, glancing at the old man's peaceful face, thought, "Peace? That's not what I seek." She was caught in a battle between life and death, and the desperation she felt was pushing her to new limits. "Which side will I choose?" she wondered, as the countdown continued. "How badly do I want to survive?" Yura, ever observant, commented with a hint of amusement. This time, he picked an interesting bunch. His eyes scanned the battlefield, noting the tension in the air. Reiyan, feeling the shift in energy around him, responded with urgency, "Forget what I said before. Sarah's power, it's increasing. She's getting faster and stronger at the same time." Shinjin, always cautious and skeptical, narrowed his eyes. "How do you know?" he questioned, his voice laced with suspicion. "I can just see it," Reiyan replied, a touch of anxiety in his tone. He wished his instincts were wrong, but the growing intensity in Sarah's aura was undeniable. Shinjin, ever the strategist, kept his gaze locked on Sarah, analyzing her every move. The clock was ticking down, only 50 seconds left. Sarah, fully aware of the limited time, steeled herself and launched a full-force charge, her power blazing around her. Reiyan, caught off guard by the sudden surge in her strength, felt a wave of dread wash over him. He silently prayed they could hold out until the countdown ended. But before he could fully process the situation, Sarah's attack landed. She struck him hard in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. He crumpled to the ground, gasping for air. "She's really strong." Her weapon drove through his chest, pain flaring through his body. But just as she moved in to finish him off, Shinjin acted swiftly. With a precise strike, he severed her right arm, forcing a scream of agony from Sarah as she turned a furious glare on him. "I can't let you harm my partner," Shinjin declared, his voice cold and unwavering. Through gritted teeth, Sarah spat out, "Why didn't you use your power earlier?" Shinjin allowed himself a small, confident smirk. "I like to keep my best moves hidden, unlike you, who showed everything in the first minute." Desperation overtook Sarah as she charged at him again, determined to land a decisive blow. But Shinjin was ready. With a swift and final motion, he ended her life with his flaming sword, the fire illuminating the grim determination in his eyes. As Sarah's body fell to the ground, the battle came to a close. Reiyan lay on the ground, his thoughts racing as he struggled to comprehend what had just happened. "I thought I was strong, but after witnessing Sarah and Shinjin, I realize there are far greater monsters in this game, he whispered, the reality of the situation sinking in. Sarah, now in her final moments, cried out in despair, tears streaming down her face. I can't die like this. Not in this damned game. Not killed by someone I don't even know. Her voice was thick with grief as she revealed her desperate search for her missing brother. Shinjin, with a chilling resolve, looked down at her. I'll find him, he promised, and with one swift motion, he ended her suffering by decapitating her. As her lifeless body fell, Yura clapped slowly, a satisfied smile on his face. Well done, he said, his voice filled with approval. You are the winners of the second round. Reiyan, still on the ground, began to heal from his wounds. Shinjin walked over and extended a hand to help him up. You did better than I expected, he admitted, a rare compliment from the usually stoic fighter. I liked your idea of jumping off the platform, but don't do it again. Next time, you might not be so lucky. Yura tried to interject, but Reiyan wasn't having it. Ignoring him completely, Reiyan made his way over to Sarah's lifeless body. With a heavy heart, he pulled out a piece of paper that Sarah had been carrying and began to read it aloud. Sarah Jones, 18 years old, searching for her brother. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of the promise he was about to make. He looked at Shinjin, determination blazing in his eyes. Remember her name, he urged. Shinjin, ever pragmatic, shrugged off Reiyan's sentimentality. It's just a promise to a dead woman, he remarked, his tone dismissive. But Reiyan wasn't going to back down. Nevertheless, it's a promise, he repeated firmly. If we cross paths with her brother, we will save him. Shinjin sighed, clearly annoyed by Reiyan's moral compass. You act too righteous for a game about death. And let's be real. If we do meet her brother, we'll probably have to kill him. Shinjin then moved to the old man's body, finding another piece of paper. He read it aloud. Jimin, 80 years old, with 3 kids, looking for a wife who's been dead for 10 years. Shinjin couldn't help but note that Jimin had voluntarily entered the god game, a concept that was evidently well known outside of the arena. Reiyan, however, was struck by the sheer strangeness of it all. Why would anyone willingly enter such a dangerous game? And what was the world outside this twisted game really like? Reiyan, eager to leave the unsettling scene behind, turned to Yura. Can we go now? But Yura wasn't done with them yet. Not quite, he said, handing them both a mysterious object. Before either of them could react, the world around them shifted, and they were thrust into a flashback. Reiyan found himself in a serene, open field, facing a much younger version of himself. The sun was shining, the air was warm, and a voice broke the calm. Guess what Mom gave me? It was his sister, Ichika, her voice full of excitement. She spoke of God, the one who had blessed them with a bountiful harvest but also brought about plagues and storms. Young Reiyan, curious and hopeful, asked if he could have one too. But Ichika, with the wisdom of an older sibling, told him that he had to earn it. As they walked back towards home, Reiyan suddenly shouted, "Wait!" Ichika turned, a puzzled look on her face. "Who are you?" she asked, but before Reiyan could respond, they were yanked back into the present. Reiyan's mind spun as he tried to process the abrupt shift in their reality. "What the hell did you do to us?" he demanded, his voice thick with both anger and confusion. Yura, clearly amused by the reaction, chuckled softly, a smirk playing on his lips. "Isn't it obvious? I gave you a gift, a reason to live." The vividness of the memory haunted Reiyan, leaving him shaken. Desperate for answers, he grabbed Yura by the collar, his eyes wide with urgency. Was that memory real? Yura didn't flinch. Instead, he casually flicked his finger, sending Reiyan sprawling backward. His voice turned cold, his previous amusement gone. "Only you can decide that. And don't touch me again." Reiyan, still reeling from the force of the flick and the implications of Yura's words, opened his mouth to ask another question. But Shinjin cut him off sharply. "Save it. Focus on what you can do to beat him. You should be grateful. You're one step closer to the answers you seek." With no time to dwell on Yura's cryptic response, They pushed forward through a door that led to the next round. On the other side, they found themselves inside a grand and ominous castle. The walls were lined with gleaming armor sets, each one meticulously displayed. Seated on an ornate throne at the far end of the room was a woman who regarded them with a mixture of boredom and curiosity. "More visitors," she mused, her eyes lingering on them before shifting back to the armor surrounding her. "Do you admire my collection? It belonged to my favorite contenders." "Contenders?" Reiyan asked, trying to understand the significance of her words. The woman smiled, a knowing gleam in her eye. "From previous god games, of course," she replied nonchalantly. Reiyan's heart skipped a beat, and he blurted out, "Previous god games?" The revelation shocked him, but it only seemed to amuse Shinjin. His patience wearing thin, he demanded, "Are you going to keep wasting our time?" The woman's smile widened into a grin, entertained by Shinjin's audacity. "Egotistical maniac, aren't you? I like that. The selfish fools who pick fights with deities are always the ones who survive the longest." Shinjin's eyes narrowed as he took a step forward, his voice firm. "What's your name?" "Inayo," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "goddess of war and destruction." Shinjin's expression remained unimpressed. "Never heard of you," he shot back, his dismissive tone making Inayo smile falter, her eyes flashing with anger. She called him a bug and declared that the god game had made her the judge of the next round. She waved her hand, making a large door appear in the room, and explained that it led to the Great Hall, where all the remaining contestants awaited. The next round required 3 participants, and the stakes had never been higher. With only one day to form a team of 3 for the upcoming round, Inayo offered food and rest if they wished, but time was short. Shinjin, wasting no time, snapped, "Let's go," and marched toward the door, leaving Reiyan behind. Reiyan hesitated, his thoughts still swirling. He turned to Inayo, still seated on her throne, and asked, "Have you seen a girl named Ichiko Azura?" Inayo's expression darkened, her amusement replaced with something far more sinister. "Do you think I'm your doormat?" she hissed, her tone dripping with disdain. "Are you really in a position to be worrying about someone else?" In an instant, she was in front of him, her eyes burning with an intense fury. "Make a deal with me," she proposed, her voice low and enticing. Reiyan, taken aback by her sudden proximity, asked cautiously, "Can judges even make deals with contestants?" "Yes," Inayo responded, a sly smile curving on her lips. "I'm sure you've sensed your divine powers by now. Otherwise, you wouldn't have survived this far. When a god selects a contestant as their champion, that champion gains a second divine power that aligns with their deity." Reiyan's mind raced with the possibilities. A second divine power? That could make me unstoppable, especially since my current abilities aren't suited for direct combat. "This is a chance I can't pass up," he replied carefully. 2 divine powers, wouldn't that be unfair?" Inayo let out a cold, mocking laugh. "Fair? What about this game has ever been fair? Fairness doesn't exist here. In this universe, deceit and strength rule. The champion who wins the favor of the gods gains the most abilities, but the truly strong will dominate with whatever they have, regardless of the odds." Reiyan considered her words. She's right. Someone who has mastered a single power could easily defeat someone with multiple powers, but no control. He recalled how Shinjin wielded his flames with lethal precision, and how Sarah enhanced her speed and strength seamlessly. But me? I've only scratched the surface of my powers. To win, I need to push myself further than ever before. Do you have what it takes? Inayo pressed, her smile widening as she studied his reaction. Yes, Reiyan answered, his voice firm with resolve. Inayo's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. If you manage to kill 3 people before the 5th round, I'll make you my champion. Reiyan's eyes widened in shock. 3 kills? Inayo's expression hardened, her tone turning icy. Make it 5, she snapped. And if you succeed, I'll tell you more about your sister. Because if you become my champion, I'm betting on you to win this god game. Why choose me and not Shinjin? Reiyan asked, his voice laced with curiosity and a hint of suspicion. Who says you're the only one I'm considering? Inayo replied cryptically, her words sending a chill down Reiyan's spine. I've only killed once, Shinjin. Now I have to do it 5 more times? Reiyan thought, feeling the weight of the challenge. But the promise of finding out about his sister was too powerful to resist. I accept, he said, his determination solidifying. Inayos' grin widened, pleased with his resolve. I'll be watching. With those words echoing in his mind, Reiyan pushed through the door and found himself in a grand dining hall filled with other contestants. The atmosphere was unsettling. They were eating, laughing, as if they weren't facing life-or-death challenges. Reiyan's thoughts drifted to Shinjin. He's probably already out there, wasting no time in securing allies, Reiyan mused. His attention was suddenly drawn to a commotion nearby. Euron was trying to convince a girl to join his team, but she was having none of it. Insisting on her strength, the argument escalated quickly. With a swift, decisive move, she slammed Euron into a nearby table, her eyes blazing with intensity. As she resumed her meal with the focus of someone entirely in control, she growled, "Screw off, or I'll rip your arm off and beat you to death with it." Reiyan watched her, recognizing raw power and determination. She's strong, he thought, his mind already made up. I want her on our team, he decided, even though the challenge of convincing her loomed large. Reiyan was impressed, and that admiration pushed him to take a bold step. As the woman strode confidently through the hallways, Reiyan followed her, his curiosity and intent sharpening with every step. He kept his distance, careful not to draw attention, yet his presence was undeniable. The woman, however, was no fool. The moment she turned a corner, she spun around with the speed of a seasoned fighter. In a flash, she whipped out a Glock and aimed it directly at Reiyan's face, her eyes narrowing into a deadly glare. "Why are you following me?" she demanded, her voice steady but laced with a cold threat. Reiyan froze, raising his hands slightly, trying to show he meant no harm. "I saw you take down Yura. It was impressive," he admitted, his tone honest. "I wanted to ask if you'd join my team for the next round." Her eyes flickered with suspicion, not lowering the gun even an inch. "Are you a pervert like Euron or a useful teammate?" she asked, her words cutting like a blade. "I'd like to think I'm useful," Reiyan replied, choosing his words carefully. He knew one wrong move, one wrong word, could end this conversation, and possibly his life. The woman seemed to consider his answer, her eyes scanning him for any sign of deceit. "Prove it," she challenged, her tone daring him to step up. She led him into a larger, dimly lit room. Pointing to a massive guy lounging in the corner, she said, "That guy killed my partner in the second round. Beat him up, and I'll join your team." Reiyan hesitated, his mind racing. "If he killed your partner, how did you both survive the round?" he asked, trying to make sense of the situation. "I won the game," she replied coldly, her expression unreadable. "But God decided to spare that meathead. Why don't you ask him yourself?" Reiyan swallowed, realizing the gravity of the challenge before him. He needed to earn her respect, and this was the only way. "What's your name?" he asked, hoping to at least know who he was fighting for. She smirked, the corner of her mouth twisting upwards in a way that sent a chill down his spine. "I'll tell you mine if you bring that boulder to his knees." Reiyan inwardly sighed. Why does she have to make everything so complicated? But there was no turning back now. He squared his shoulders and approached the massive guy, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on him. The other contestants watched with keen interest, their gazes piercing through him as they analyzed every move, every breath. "I have nothing to hide but everything to gain from this fight," he thought, determination hardening his resolve. He came face to face with the big guy, feeling the tension in the air thicken. The man was a mountain of muscle, towering over Reiyan, but that didn't deter him. Reiyan stared directly into his opponent's eyes, refusing to back down, ready to do whatever it took to bring him down. Reiyan barely noticed the big guy rushing at him until the roar of "Wake up!" snapped him to attention. His body reacted on instinct, dodging the attack with a flicker of foresight. "What's your problem?" "I haven't done anything," Reiyan snapped. Yet, Tauros growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You haven't done anything yet?" A girl standing next to a brooding, weird-looking guy chimed in casually, "Tauros, relax. You're going to scare him if you keep that up." Reiyan pointed at her. "Did Tauros kill your partner?" Tauros' expression darkened immediately. "What if I did?" Reiyan didn't flinch. "If she beat you, how are you still standing here?" A twisted smile crept across Tauros' face as he recounted how he savored the defeat of her partner. But, in the end, the gods spared him. "Too strong to let die in the second round," he said with pride. "I was too valuable to waste." Reiyan's mind raced. If the gods had kept Tauros alive for the game's sake, his strength had to be incredible. He remembered seeing others fall, but if Tauros was spared, it meant his power was beyond anything Reiyan had faced before. And yet, the pink-haired girl had defeated him, which meant she was stronger. Without warning, Reiyan struck first, delivering a sharp blow that left Tauros reeling, dropping to his knees. But before Reiyan could follow through, Tauros caught his fist in midair, his grip like steel. He looked up, a wicked grin still plastered on his face. "You think that's enough?" Tauros growled, his voice like gravel as he tightened his hold until Reiyan winced in pain. With a sudden burst of strength, Tauros lifted Reiyan and slammed him into the ground over and over, like a predator playing with its prey. "Picking fights you can't win?" Tauros taunted as he slammed Reiyan down once again. Nearby, a green-haired girl sighed in boredom. "This is getting dull," she muttered, glancing at a guy with glasses. Yoon, seemingly unfazed, adjusted his glasses. "Should I step in?" "He did kind of ask for this," Yoon said with a nonchalant shrug. "That's the nature of this game. If you're not strong enough, you'll pay for it." Tauros glared down at Reiyan, who lay dazed on the floor. "Why are you still breathing?" he asked, his voice dripping with malice. He tossed Reiyan into the air, clearly ready to end it for good. But just as Tauros wound up for the final blow, a voice echoed in Reiyan's mind. "Are you really going to let this happen? Show him what you're made of." Reiyan's eyes snapped open as a strange energy surged through him. In that instant, he saw a path, a way out. As Tauros swung, Reiyan dodged with newfound speed, landing a precise blow to his chest. "Should I run?" Reiyan thought, panic surging through him. "No," the voice urged. "Are you going to stay afraid? Or are you going to rise?" Something shifted in Reiyan. The pain began to fade, replaced by a cold, focused intensity. Tauros noticed the change, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What's happening?" he muttered. Reiyan's movements became sharper, more precise. He dodged Tauros' strikes with ease, each step calculated. He followed the path he saw in his mind, striking Tauros' weak spots one by one until, with a final punch, he sent the giant crashing to the ground. The pink-haired girl watched in disbelief. Did he really just take down Tauros? But Tauros wasn't finished. He rose to his feet, his divine power crackling in the air around him. "You think I'll let you get away after that?" he roared, unleashing his energy, ready to strike again. Reiyan's body screamed in pain, every muscle burning. He knew he couldn't take another hit. Just then, Yoon stepped forward, hands casually in his pockets. "That's enough," Yoon said, his voice calm but carrying a subtle threat. Reiyan blinked, barely able to process what was happening. Yoon sighed and shook his head. "Feels like I'm breaking up a schoolyard fight. If this keeps up, I'll have to step in," he added, his tone light but edged with warning. Tauros scowled, clearly enraged. "Who do you think you are?" he snarled, charging at Yoon. In an instant, Yoon moved. A single blur of motion, and Tauros hit the ground, unconscious. The room fell into stunned silence as everyone stared, trying to grasp what had just happened. Yoon turned to Reiyan, offering a casual nod. "Name's Yoon, and this is my partner, Kayla," he said, introducing the green-haired girl as she stepped forward to heal Reiyan's injuries. Reiyan, barely able to speak, managed a breathless thanks before passing out. When Reiyan woke, the pink-haired girl was beside him. "You've got something in you," she said thoughtfully. "You're not the strongest, but you've got guts." Kayla gave a soft smile as she finished healing him. "Those guts will get you into trouble if you keep relying on them. You'll need more than luck to survive." Reiyan nodded, the memories of his narrow escapes in previous rounds flashing through his mind. I need to be smarter about this. After a pause, the pink-haired girl spoke again. You knocked Tauros down. That was the deal. I'm in. Reiyan smiled, relieved. Then let's win this game together. Era glanced at Reiyan and asked if he had another teammate. He hesitated, his thoughts briefly turning to Shinjin. When he asked for her name, she introduced herself as Era. With her help, Reiyan stood up, thanked her, and inquired about Yun, wanting to express his gratitude. Kayla led him to meet Yun, who greeted him with a light-hearted joke before getting serious. Yun suggested Reiyan consider leaving his current team and joining him and Kayla for the upcoming third round. Reiyan thought about it for a moment before politely declining. He explained that he was already committed to another team. Yun, curious, asked who the third member was. As if on cue, Shinjin appeared, claiming his place as Reiyan's teammate. Yun made a few more jokes before departing, leaving Reiyan and Shinjin to talk. As they walked away, Shinjin mentioned that Yun was the second strongest person he had encountered in the castle. Intrigued, Reiyan asked about the first. Shinjin simply promised to tell him when they met that person. Reiyan then turned to Era, who extended her hand, introducing herself as the third member of their team. Shinjin, visibly irritated, commented that Reiyan had chosen a new member without consulting him. Reiyan retorted that he didn't even know Shinjin would partner with him in the first place. Era broke the tension with a light comment, saying the two seemed to get along well, and assured Shinjin that he wouldn't regret having her on the team. Reluctantly, Shinjin agreed and motioned for them to follow him. Curious, Era asked where they were headed. Shinjin explained that Reiyan hadn't yet learned how to summon his weapon, and he planned to teach him so he wouldn't be a liability in the third round. Reiyan eagerly followed as they made their way to the training grounds, where Shinjin began his instruction. He told Reiyan to recall the sensation he felt when he first summoned his weapon during the initial round. Summoning a weapon, Shinjin explained, required a strong emotion and a clear intent to call it forth. Surprised that Reiyan had made it this far without understanding how to summon his weapon, Era demonstrated by summoning her own. Reiyan, clearly impressed, asked what emotion she used to summon it. With a calm but distant expression, she replied, longing. Reiyan then explained that he and God hadn't discussed weapons before, and that he had been handcuffed during the first round, shocking both Shinjin and Era. Shinjin, taken aback, remarked that he hadn't heard of anyone being put at such a disadvantage before. The fact that Reiyan had survived the entire round without his weapon was astonishing to them both. Reiyan asked Shinjin what he was implying. Shinjin replied that something felt off about Reiyan's situation. He suggested that either God wanted Reiyan to fail, or perhaps Reiyan was too strong, and God might be trying to suppress his strength. Reiyan dismissed the idea, but Era chuckled, intrigued by Shinjin's observation. Curious, Reiyan asked Shinjin what emotion he taps into when summoning his weapon. Shinjin responded without hesitation, rage. He hinted to Reiyan that if he knew the reason behind it, she might understand better. Shinjin advised Reiyan to reflect on his past and find an emotion that could help him summon his weapon. Era agreed it was a solid plan. Shinjin made it clear that he wouldn't team up with Reiyan if he couldn't summon his weapon, as his weakness could drag the team down. He reminded Reiyan that he had warned him about this before the second round. Era tried to defend Reiyan, suggesting that Shinjin's words were harsh, but Shinjin countered with the reality they were in, a death game where 2 million souls fought for entertainment. He bluntly stated that if Reiyan couldn't summon his weapon, he was doomed, and Shinjin wasn't going to let him drag him down with him. Despite Shinjin's harsh stance, Era encouraged Reiyan, reminding him that he had surprised her before. Reiyan fell into deep thought, diving into his memories to find a defining emotion. Finally, after intense concentration, he managed to summon his weapon but lost consciousness in the process. When he woke, Reiyan found himself laughing uncontrollably, startling his teammates. Concerned, Reiyan asked how long he had been out, and Reiyan learned that he had been unconscious for 3 hours. Shinjin then inquired about the emotion that triggered his weapon, and with tears in his eyes, Reiyan revealed that it was bloodlust. Shinjin was shocked, but Reiyan tried to explain that this wasn't who he truly was. Era interrupted, pointing out that none of them fully knew themselves. Reiyan, unsettled, began to question how bloodlust became his defining emotion, but quickly resolved that it didn't matter. He assured them that, whatever his past was, his future actions would define who he had become. Shinjin, however, reminded Reiyan that the past couldn't be changed. What mattered in the game was surviving by any means necessary, and he warned Reiyan not to lose himself in the process. After the discussion, the group began to train rigorously, focusing on sharpening their moves, skills, and strategy for the next round. An hour before the third round, they were called back to the hall. Shinjin pointed out a Viking-like figure, identifying him as the strongest contender in the game. Reiyan, despite facing fierce opponents in the past, admitted that this man frightened him the most. Curious, Reiyan asked Shinjin who the man was, but Shinjin didn't know his name. What shocked them all, even more, was that the Viking-like man appeared to be entering the third round alone. Era was stunned, calling it madness, but Shinjin corrected her. "It's not madness," he said. "It's confidence. He believes he can defeat everyone in the game." Yura and Inio appear to announce the start of the third round. They invite those who are ready to proceed. As the strange man heads toward the next round, Inio asks if he is enjoying the game. He responds curtly, telling her that she's annoying, and that he looks forward to silencing her when this is all over. Observing from a distance, Era wonders if the goddess and the man know each other, noting the familiarity in their interaction. Reiyan suggests that they probably all encountered Inio before arriving at the castle, dismissing the need to dwell on it. "Let's move on," Shinjin says, urging the group to head toward the next round. As they stood at the threshold of the next round, Yura questioned the group. "Are you sticking together for the next round?" His question hung in the air for a moment before everyone firmly replied, "Yes." Satisfied, he gestured for them to proceed. Inio, watching them head toward the door, wished them luck, her words trailing behind as they stepped into the unknown. Walking side by side, Reiyan turned to Era. "Nervous?" His question had an edge, like a challenge. Era, without breaking stride, shot back, "Not at all." As they approached the door to round 3, Shinjin's voice cut through the tense quiet. "Keep your nerves in check, Reiyan. It's the only way you'll make it out alive." His tone was deadly serious. They swung the door open, and darkness swallowed them. Reiyan cursed under his breath. "I can't see a damn thing. Someone light this place up?" "Hold on," Shinjin said, his voice low. "We're in a cave. I can feel it." Suddenly, another voice echoed through the cavern, confirming their suspicion. "Yes, you are in a cave," the voice said, just as the lights blazed to life, revealing a strange figure. Reiyan squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Is that a monkey?" he muttered, confusion evident. Era examined the figure closely. "He looks human, though." Shinjin's expression darkened. "He's both," he said, almost as if to himself. Era whipped around, fury in her eyes. "You know him, don't you?" she snapped. Shinjin hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, and seeing him here, we're in serious trouble. That's Sun Wukong, the Monkey King." Wukong grinned, a wicked glint in his eyes. "Glad you've heard of me." His voice was filled with amusement, but it carried a dangerous edge. "Welcome to round 3. I'm your facilitator, and the game is Capture the Flag." He pointed to a flag behind him, a symbol of the challenge ahead. "Inio got into some unfortunate trouble, so I've been called in. Aren't you lucky to have me?" His grin widened, predatory. "Let's see if you can impress me." With a casual gesture, Wukong ran his fingers through his hair and, in one swift motion, pulled out a long staff. Reiyan's eyes widened in disbelief. Where did that come from? Era, however, didn't flinch. "I'm ready." Shinjin, ever the pragmatist, cut in. "Just get on with it. Explain the rules." Wukong's grin never faltered. "It's simple," he began. "Somewhere in this cave is another team. Both teams will be given a flag. To win, you have to steal the enemy's flag and return it to your base. You must have both flags in your possession to win. You've got 3 hours, and as usual, killing is allowed." A tense silence followed his words as they sank in. Then, Era broke it. "And if we lose?" Wukong's smile grew darker. This round's a bit different. If you lose, I get to pick one person from your team to survive. Just one. Without waiting for a response, Wukong turned and disappeared into the shadows. I'm off to explain the rules to the other team. Oh, and one last thing. Cheat, and I'll kill you. Reiyan couldn't help but mutter, I thought Euro was bad. The group quickly regrouped, turning to Shinjin for a plan. What's the strategy? Era asked, her tone sharp. Shinjin crossed his arms, calculating. We don't know who we're up against, so the safest approach is to defend and attack simultaneously. I'm the strongest, so I'll guard our flag. Reiyan and Era, you take the offensive. We'll hit them hard, but we can't leave ourselves exposed. After a brief exchange of ideas, Reiyan and Era set off to begin their mission. As they moved deeper into the cave, Era spoke quietly. You don't seem scared. Even when we fought Taurus, you were calm. Reiyan's eyes narrowed, his thoughts dark. Calm isn't the right word. It's like something switches inside me when I fight. Everything else disappears. Fear, hesitation, none of it matters. It's all instinct. His voice grew more intense. I need to understand why I'm like this. Why I can flip that switch and feel nothing. Why killing comes so easily to me. He glanced at Era, his voice low. This is just the beginning. I barely know who I am, or who my sister was. Era's curiosity was piqued. Your sister? Was she in your memories? Reiyan responded, yes, but honestly, I wouldn't even know if I'd recognize her now. Even if she'd been in Enya's castle, I probably wouldn't have noticed. He paused, glancing at Era. Are you looking for someone? Era shook her head. No. A lot of people in this god game, they're either searching for someone or chasing a purpose, like wanting to be the strongest. But me? My paper only had my name and age on it. I'm looking for no one, and I have no purpose, she said, her voice flat, but with a hint of sadness creeping in. She continued, the weight of her words deepening. It's strange, you know? Everyone else seems to have a reason to live, something written down for them to follow. But me? Nothing. Her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. Even the memory they showed me. Was I even in it? All I remember is lying on the floor, my head bleeding, and this man standing behind me. I couldn't see his face. He was just a shadow. Reiyan's voice cut through her anguish. Isn't that your reason to survive? To figure out who that was and beat the hell out of them? Era let out a bitter chuckle. That sounds like a revenge plot someone like Shinjin would love, she teased with a faint smile. Turning to Reiyan, she added softly, I'm glad you talked to me in the hallway. If you hadn't, I wouldn't have had a single person in this hellhole to make me smile. Reiyan's mind wandered as Era spoke. He couldn't help but think how nobody had ever really tried to befriend him. Even Shinjin and Yun only saw him as an enigma because of his divine powers. They didn't see him as a person. Meanwhile, Shinjin stood alone, guarding their flag. He heard the faint sound of crumbling rock from above and instinctively summoned his weapon, pointing it upward. From the shadows, Wukong appeared with a mischievous grin. Didn't think we'd meet again so soon, Shinjin. And with allies, too. That's progress. Shinjin's expression hardened. Shut up. Interfering in the game is against the rules. You know the gods could have your head for this. Wukong only laughed. Relax, the cave's huge. No one's going to be here for a while. He leaned in slightly, his tone changing. I've got a deal for you, Shinjin. Shinjin narrowed his eyes. What do you want? Wukong's grin widened. I want you to win, Shinjin. Your drive, your desire to win. It's wild, and I love it. But there's more. His voice dropped, taking on a dangerous edge. I want you to kill Era. For a moment, Shinjin stared at Wukong, stunned. What? He whispered. Wukong raised a hand, as if to calm him. Hear me out. I'll sponsor you. Make you my champion if you do it. It doesn't have to be this round. I'll give you 3 rounds, including this one, to take her out. But if she dies on her own, the deal's off. It has to be you, Shinjin. I want you to be the one who kills her. Shinjin's grip on his weapon tightened. Why her? What's your game? Wukong's expression turned dark. It's not about her. It's her sponsor. I want to see him suffer for something he did centuries ago. Shinjin glared at him. You're bringing politics into the god game? Wukong shrugged casually. You and I both know this god game is just entertainment for the gods. But for someone like you, killing a girl you just met, that should be easy. After all, you've done far worse. Shinjin locked eyes with Wukong, his voice low but edged with threat. Maybe when this game is over, I'll come for you too. Wukong grinned, his mischievous nature showing through. That's the spirit I like in you, Shinjin. With that, he disappeared, leaving the cave to its shadows. Meanwhile, Era turned to Reiyan, her voice breaking the tense silence. How long does this cave stretch on? Reiyan glanced at their surroundings, a sense of unease gnawing at him. We've been walking for nearly an hour. Their conversation trailed off as the enemy's flag came into view, but before they could reach it, a punch slammed into Reiyan with brutal force, sending him hurtling backward. He crashed against the cave wall, gasping for air as the wind was knocked out of him. Era, her instincts flaring, summoned her weapon immediately. "Show yourself," she shouted, the cave echoing her challenge. From the darkness stepped Tauros, flanked by his team, each of them radiating a dangerous aura. Well, what are the chances? Tauros sneered, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Seems like the gods delivered you right to me." Era's eyes darted between their opponents, tension coursing through her body. "Damn it," she hissed. Reiyan, still recovering from the blow, quickly sized up the situation. They were outnumbered, and Tauros's team had them right where they wanted. His mind raced, trying to devise a plan. But before he could, Tauros' voice rang out. "Callista," Tauros said, addressing the blue-haired girl by his side. "The boy's mine. Take care of the girl." Callista's cold eyes locked onto Era as she stepped forward. "I've heard a lot about you," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Who's your guardian again?" "Zephyr," Era shot back. "The god of the winds." Callista let out a mocking laugh. "Zephyr? That weakling?" Era's temper flared. Without hesitation, she unleashed a volley of bullets, her divine power guiding them toward Callista. But with a simple wave of her hand, Callista raised an ice barrier, effortlessly blocking the attack. "You're so emotional," Callista sneered. "Tauros warned me about your little tricks." Era's frustration mounted. She tried to steady herself, taking a deep breath. "Ice barriers won't protect you forever," she muttered, but Callista seemed unfazed. As Era struggled to land a hit, Reiyan's mind raced. He observed the dynamics of their opponents, breaking down their abilities. Era's power allowed her to move bullets in any direction she focused on, but Callista's ice abilities countered that perfectly, providing an impenetrable defense. Tauros, on the other hand, was all brute strength, a terrifying offensive force. Together, they were formidable. Tauros is the key, Reiyan thought. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the silent figure standing behind them, someone who hadn't yet made a move. What's his role? He wondered. Turning to Era, Reiyan spoke quickly. "Give me a breakdown of Tauros's powers." Era responded swiftly, detailing his overwhelming strength and near-impenetrable defenses. Armed with that knowledge, Reiyan summoned his weapon, feeling the familiar weight in his hands. "You ready?" Era gave a half-smile. "You're the one charging in. Shouldn't I be asking you that?" Reiyan grinned back, his focus sharpening. "Fair enough. But you know me. I'm always ready." Without wasting another second, Reiyan charged headfirst into battle. Tauros, his grin growing wider, shouted to Callista, "Shoot the ice." To Reiyan's shock, shards of ice shot toward him from multiple angles. So her power isn't just defense, he realized as he dodged the onslaught. Tauros barreled toward him, fists encased in gauntlets, each swing deadly and precise. Reiyan ducked and dodged, but the sheer power behind Tauros's strikes sent shudders through the cave walls. A single hit from those gauntlets would have shattered bone. Reiyan retaliated with quick strikes, but Tauros blocked every attempt with ease. "Why can't I find an opening?" Reiyan thought, his frustration growing. He darted behind Tauros, hoping to catch him off guard, but suddenly, he felt a cold grip around his legs. "Ice." He was trapped. Reiyan's eyes snapped toward Callista. It's her, he thought, realization dawning. She's been covering Tauros's weak points the whole time. As the ice tightened around him, Reiyan's mind whirled, piecing it together. Callista wasn't just a shield. She was the secret to Tauros's defense. Without her, Tauros was vulnerable. It had always been Reiyan against one opponent at a time, but now, facing two made it impossible to pinpoint any weaknesses. You're even cockier than I thought, Tauros growled, smashing his fist into Reiyan, who was still trapped in the ice. The force of the blow sent Reiyan flying, his body crashing against the cave wall. Era screamed Reiyan's name, watching helplessly as he was flung through the air. Tauros turned to the silent figure behind him. Leave the boy to me, he ordered the weird guy. And take care of Era. I don't want to play with someone else's prey. Grabbing Reiyan by the head, Tauros lifted him effortlessly. Why do you have the eyes of the gods? He demanded. What's your connection to them? Stop wasting time, Callista snapped from a distance. Finish him already. But before Tauros could act, a gunshot echoed through the cavern. He barely flinched as a bullet whizzed by, and Era stepped forward, her voice cold and commanding. Let him go. Your fight's with me. Tauros turned, surprised by what he saw, Era, but now with two guns in her hands. His eyes widened. A second gun? Since when? He hadn't seen her use it in the second round. Era aimed both weapons at him, her gaze unyielding. You didn't need it, Tauros taunted. But that's why you let your partner die in the previous round. Selfish, wasn't it? You could have saved them, but you held back. And now, you want to save Reiyan? His words dripped with scorn, cutting deep. A flashback hit Era like a lightning strike. She remembered her teammate, Lily, before the second round, begging Era to save her as she was being killed by Tauros. Lily had told Era that if anyone should survive, it should be her. Era had kept firing at Tauros, but without her second gun, she couldn't finish the job. She had held back, and Lily had paid the price. Snapping back to the present, Era's voice was steady, but filled with regret. Holding back was a mistake. Letting Lily die was a mistake. It should have never happened. Her eyes darkened with resolve. But I won't let another teammate die again. Callista scoffed, interrupting. Save your stories. She stood, but before she could act, Era fired multiple rounds, each bullet slicing through Callista's defenses with ease. The icy barriers shattered under the relentless assault. Callista, now wounded, looked at Era in disbelief. How are you breaking my ice? Era's expression remained cold. Zephyr's divine power works differently depending on the weapon. Flicker, my first pistol, lets me curve small objects and control them with my gaze. But Scintillate, the power of my second pistol, allows me to control the speed of anything I see. Her voice lowered with menace. I made a mistake once. I won't make it again. Both Tauros and Callista stood frozen, staring in shock. Two powers. Callista muttered, her voice barely audible. Complicated, but it doesn't matter. Callista forced herself to stand tall. Era's my prey now. Stay out of my way, she warned Tauros. Summoning her ice soldiers, she commanded them to attack. But Era, with deadly precision, obliterated each of them in a storm of bullets. The icy soldiers fell one by one, and Callista was caught in the onslaught, barely holding herself together. Tauros called out to her, desperation creeping into his voice. But it was too late. Callista, her body battered and broken, looked toward him, tears in her eyes. It's up to you now, she whispered, her voice trembling. Era, without hesitation, finished her off with a single bullet to the head. Era's gaze turned toward Tauros, cold and menacing. You're next, she said, her voice a deadly promise. Tauros glanced toward the Hitin, who remained still, as if watching from a distance. Aren't you going to do anything? Tauros growled, frustration rising. But then, the truth hit Tauros like a blow. The Hitin had made a contract. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension. If they knew I made a contract, they would have never partnered with me. Reiyan began to suspect that the Hitin had made a contract with a god. Tauros, eyes blazing with power, glared at him. "When I'm done with Reiyan, I'm coming for you," he growled, directing his words at the Hitin. Tauros powered up and charged at Reiyan, who barely dodged the strike. "You good?" Era asked, her voice tense. Reiyan, catching his breath, responded, "Never better." But then his expression darkened. "Do you notice it? He's getting stronger." Era nodded. "Yeah, I saw it too in the second round." Reiyan's voice lowered. "Tauros's divine power. It's making him stronger the longer this fight drags on." Tauros, now brimming with energy, laughed as he confirmed their suspicions. "The Minotaur is my guardian. The more divine powers that are used around me, the stronger I become." In a flash, he lunged at Era, but she barely dodged his attack. Before anyone could react, Tauros charged again, his speed almost impossible to track. Reiyan's heart raced as he feared Era wouldn't make it in time, but she narrowly avoided the blow. Just as Reiyan regained his focus, Tauros turned on him with even more speed. But as Tauros swung his fist toward Reiyan, Era fired a well-timed bullet, knocking Tauros off balance. He turned his rage toward her. His punch landed hard, and Era, her leg injured, couldn't dodge this time. She crumpled to the ground in pain. Seeing this, Reiyan spotted an opening. Without hesitation, he rushed to her side. "We need to kill him now." Era grunted through the pain. "You attack, I'll cover you." Reiyan's determination flared. He couldn't let Era shoulder the burden alone. Era took down Callista. "Now it's my turn," he muttered to himself. Eyes locked on Tauros. As Tauros prepared for another attack, a memory flooded his mind. Callista had once been the second person he'd met who didn't fear him. The first was his former teammate, whose name he never learned. He had died in front of Tauros, leaving him with a painful regret. Tauros had long wanted revenge, but hadn't known how to handle the ache. Callista had found him after, noticing his tears and warning him that showing weakness would make him a target. She had told him that revenge wouldn't make the pain disappear, especially since he didn't even know the boy who had died. Despite her words, they had become allies. Back in the present, Tauros's eyes hardened. Era was still alive, and so was Reiyan. He charged at Reiyan, fists raised. But Reiyan dodged and went straight for Tauros's heart, only to be caught mid-strike. The two locked in a fierce power struggle, neither willing to back down. Then, a gunshot rang out. Era's bullet struck Tauros's arm, weakening him just enough for Reiyan's weapon to pierce his heart. Gasping, Tauros refused to fall. He grabbed Reiyan by the head, pulling him close. "If revenge doesn't make me feel better, then what will?" His voice was filled with an emptiness that echoed in the cavern. Slowly, his grip loosened, and he released Reiyan. As Tauros fell to the ground, his voice softened. "I'm done with this game. Maybe next time." Reiyan stood over Tauros's body, picking up the letter the bald giant had left behind. It read, "Tauros Fernandez, a 33-year-old man who spent most of his life alone, searching for people he could trust." Reiyan's eyes darkened with a quiet sorrow. "Sorry we took that from you," he whispered. Turning to Hitin, Reiyan's grip tightened on his weapon. "I assume you're not just going to stand there and let us take your flag?" Hitin gave a slow smile. As Tauros said, "I made a contract with a god." Reiyan demanded answers from the Hitin. In response, the guy raised his hand, and a puppet appeared. Calmly, he asked the puppet, "Cthulhu, what do you think of Era and Reiyan?" "They are weak," the puppet responded, its eyes glowing faintly. Both Reiyan and Era were taken aback. Hitin continued, remarking on their frailty, noting how one was barely conscious and the other was hanging on. He asked the puppet who the stronger one was, expecting Era, but to his surprise, the puppet whispered, "The boy." Without hesitation, Reiyan charged at him, but Hitin dodged effortlessly. Before Reiyan could react, he was engulfed in darkness, suddenly trapped in an unfamiliar space. A voice from the void urged him to stay calm, but the surroundings were unsettling. A towering figure, Cthulhu, appeared before him and asked, "What do you fear most?" Reiyan's resolve solidified, and with sheer willpower, he shattered the illusion, breaking free from the dark hold. Hitin looked astonished. No one had ever escaped the Mad Dreamer's illusions. Realizing that Era was caught in the same illusion, Reiyan quickly saw that she was about to shoot herself. He rushed over, stopping her just in time, redirecting her gun and knocking her out gently. Apologizing quietly, he whispered that she deserved better, but this wasn't her end. Hitin, seemingly amused, commented on Era's interesting nature, but turned his attention back to Reiyan, his curiosity growing. He revealed that the bloodthirsty voice in Reiyan was something even Reiyan himself didn't fully understand. The puppet, Cthulhu, could see things buried deep within him, things unknown to him. In response, Reiyan was shown a vision, standing over the bodies of a dead family. Confused and shaken, he demanded to know why he was seeing this. The Mad Dreamer explained that these were Reiyan's memories, buried deep in his consciousness. Reiyan struggled to understand if these memories were real. Hitin coldly informed him that while Reiyan didn't know, his body and blood did. The truth was in him all along. Suddenly, Reiyan's body began to tremble, as if remembering something long suppressed. The feelings he had when he first met Tenjin resurfaced. The switch flipped inside him once more, and he felt a darker power surge through him. His demeanor shifted, and his voice, colder and more dangerous, broke the silence. "So, you finally dragged me out. What do you want?" Hitin's grin widened. This was the real Reiyan. Cthulhu, sensing the change, asked Reiyan to become his champion, but Reiyan, cold and composed, refused. He hadn't forgotten the vision he had just been shown and made it clear it was too sensitive to be manipulated by anyone. Hitin, shocked that Reiyan could recall such memories without divine intervention, struggled to understand what this meant. Reiyan, now fully aware of his power, smirked, informing the Hitin that the gods couldn't suppress the real him. Hitin was stunned, realizing that Cthulhu had kept crucial information from him. Desperately, Cthulhu attempted to persuade Reiyan once more, but Reiyan stood firm. "The gods may have given me these eyes, but I am no one's puppet," he declared. Reiyan's eyes darkened, clearly offended by Cthulhu's words. "You're calling me foolish? Foolishness is summoning me by pissing me off," he growled. "You thought I forgot what happened to my family? Stay out of my business." His glare was sharp, almost deadly, as he charged at them. They tried to trap him in multiple illusions, but Reiyan shattered through them with ease. One illusion showed his mother, but without hesitation, he slashed through her, making Hitin laugh insanely. "She's already dead," Reiyan muttered coldly. Hitin's illusions grew more complex, multiplying into dozens of clones, making it harder for Reiyan to disperse them. Reiyan's mind raced as he analyzed Hitin's power, figuring out that his illusions took hold through eye contact, casting weaker minds, like Era's, into a maze of false realities. Did he just call her dumb? Reiyan thought grimly. Hitin's illusions, however, also seemed to have physical effects, creating clones that could switch places with him, making it nearly impossible to strike the real body. Reiyan charged again, only for Hitin to switch places once more. But after relentless pursuit, Reiyan finally caught the real one, ready to strike him down. Just as he was about to land the killing blow, Hitin grabbed Era's gun and pointed it at her, threatening to end her life. "Do you really think taking a stranger hostage will stop me from killing you?" Reiyan growled, unfazed by the threat. Cthulhu chimed in, agreeing he just cut through his own mother's illusion. "What makes you think this will stop him?" Reiyan stepped forward, his body ready to charge, but suddenly, a voice inside him whispered, "I won't let you kill my friend." Reiyan froze for a moment, a long, internal argument waging inside him. Just as quickly, the voice within him switched back to his former self. Hitin, realizing what happened, sneered, "You just threw away your only chance of beating me by switching back." Before Hitin could act, Shinjin appeared out of nowhere, his blade flashing as he attacked. Hitin barely managed to dodge the strike. "Looks like you're a bit tied up," Shinjin said, glancing at Tauros and Callista's dead bodies on the ground. "Take Era and the flag. There's not much time left in this round." Reiyan's eyes narrowed. "No, you take Era and go. I'll deal with him." After a moment of hesitation, Shinjin agreed, lifting Era and taking the flag. As Shinjin was leaving, Hitin used Era's weapon to fire at them. Reiyan immediately shouted a warning. Don't make eye contact with him. The illusions come through that. Hitin aimed at Shinjin, but Reiyan moved faster than expected, blocking the shot. Shinjin's eyes widened in disbelief. You cut through the bullet. The speed of the bullets was blinding, faster than anything Shinjin had seen. But Reiyan seemed to react as though he had known their paths all along. Shinjin, still in shock, muttered, "The bullets are fast enough to come from anywhere at any moment, and yet Reiyan can see and react to them." With Reiyan's help, Shinjin finally got away with Era and the flag. Hitin turned to Cthulhu, eyes filled with confusion. There's something different about Reiyan. His reactions and movements are faster, closer to his true self. Cthulhu nodded in agreement. Reiyan doesn't have divine power augmenting his speed. For him to react like that, it means he knows the bullet's trajectory before it moves. Hitin's eyes widened in realization. Reiyan's eyes, they see the future. That's how he's been outmaneuvering us. As they came to this revelation, Reiyan's presence loomed over them like a predator circling his prey. Reiyan found himself in a different place, face to face with his other self. His darker side sneered, arms crossed. "So, you managed to take over. Not bad. I didn't think you had the guts to pull it off, but you're going to get us both killed." Reiyan, unfazed, shot back. "I can handle that Hitin on my own." His other self, not convinced, shook his head. "I don't trust you to survive. Let me show you something hidden, something that the gods kept from you." Back in the present, Cthulhu was observing Reiyan, murmuring to Hitin, "There's another layer to his power we didn't expect." Hitin frowned. Why didn't he use it before? And why now? His mind raced as he realized that Reiyan had become a completely different opponent. He can see the future? No matter. I'll just keep attacking until something breaks. Without hesitation, Hitin started shooting at Reiyan with Era's gun. Cthulhu warned, no human can process this level of illusions and attacks, even with those eyes. But Reiyan, unfazed, dodged each attack effortlessly, leaving Hitin shaken. Hitin tried to switch positions, but Cthulhu interrupted. Wait. Reiyan, having studied the pattern, anticipated the move. He faked out Hitin, predicting where he would teleport next. Turning swiftly, Reiyan threw his weapon with deadly precision. Hitin smirked, thinking Reiyan had made a fatal mistake. He really gave up his weapon? What an idiot, Hitin thought as he switched places again, watching his illusion get sliced by Reiyan. But just as he was ready to taunt Reiyan, a crushing punch landed square on his jaw. The impact sent Hitin sprawling to the ground. This weird guy had it coming for playing our guy for so long? The force of the blow left Cthulhu in a panic. Cthulhu yelled, "Switch fast." But before Hitin could react, Reiyan grabbed Cthulhu, separating him from the Hitin. The realization hit hard. Hitin had been played. Every move he made, Reiyan had predicted. By throwing away his weapon, Reiyan had forced Hitin to drop his guard for just a split second. He had fallen right into Reiyan's trap. Hitin, now breathless, chuckled bitterly. "You were a worthy opponent," he said, looking up at Reiyan, who towered over him, expression cold. "I hope we meet again someday." Reiyan stared down at him, unimpressed. Without another word, he delivered the final blow, ending the fight. Meanwhile, Shinjin carried Era and the flag back to their base. He worried about Reiyan, hoping he was still alive. His thoughts shifted to what Wukong had said about killing Era, and the weight of it pressed down on him. Suddenly, Wukong appeared out of nowhere, grinning wickedly. "Congratulations," he said, eyes gleaming. "You've won the game." Reiyan approached, guarded. "What do you want?" Wukong's grin widened. "Your divine power is something special," he mused. "Those eyes of yours, they have the gods at the edge of their seats. God has never given such eyes to a participant before." He leaned in, as if to whisper a secret. "Just how much can you see, Reiyan? Don't tell me yet. Keep the mystery alive." With a laugh, Wukong opened a portal and gestured toward it. "As the victor, you're moving on to the next round." Reiyan's gaze hardened. Where are Shinjin and Era? Wukong's smirk turned sinister. Find them yourself. Without warning, Wukong pushed Reiyan, sending him flying through the portal, leaving an unsettling laugh in his wake. Reiyan found himself teleported into a room, confused and disoriented. As he scanned the surroundings, his eyes landed on Yun. Relief washed over him seeing a familiar face. I knew you'd make it through the third round, Yun said, grinning. Glad you made it too, Reiyan replied, his tone lighter. What about Kayla? Kayla's totally fine, Yun said, reassuring him. We made it through together. Suddenly, a portal opened, and a massive Viking-like figure stepped out. Enough, the Viking boomed. This is the God game. Companionship has no place here. Reiyan instantly recognized him. This is the guy I saw in Ineos Castle, the strongest one there. He wondered if the Viking had survived the third round alone. You're a real buzzkill, you know that? Yun shot back, unfazed by the intimidating presence. Before they could respond, another participant appeared, seemingly just as confused. Are we already in another round? She asked. I'm not sure, Reiyan muttered, while Yun, not so subtly, eyed the girl, clearly finding her cute. They began speculating why Wukong had separated them from their teammates. Is this another waiting room? One of them asked aloud. Before they could get any answers, Wukong appeared with a twisted grin. I wanted to play another round with all of you, he said, his voice filled with dark amusement. I like to invite my favorite contestants to a bonus game. The winner will become my champion. Without warning, Wukong pulled out a Glock, his smile widening. To win the God game, skill and talent are important, sure. But this game? It's all about luck. Meanwhile, in another scene, Inio was bowing before a god sitting on a throne while other gods watched. The god's voice echoed through the hall. I gave everyone one rule, yet Inio disregarded it. Inio stayed silent as the god continued. No one can choose the same champion as me. Offering my champion more power would tip the balance of the game, especially with Reiyan. A nearby god, Asura, asked, What's so special about Reiyan? Inio snapped, God speaks of balance. Yet he handicapped Reiyan compared to the other contestants. He handcuffed Reiyan and hid his divine power from him. Inio's voice grew louder, filled with rage. Reiyan is God's champion, yet he wants him to lose. Who is Reiyan? Inio asked, breaking the tension. Back in the room, Wukong's voice dripped with excitement. Today's game is my favorite, Russian roulette. The rules were chillingly simple. There are 3 bullets in the gun, Wukong explained. You will point the gun at your head and pull the trigger. If there's a bullet in the chamber, you die. We'll play until only one remains alive. Yun's face turned serious as Wukong set the gun on the table and nodded at him to go first. Reiyan, in shock, screamed, Wait, there has to be another way. Yun, calm despite the terror hanging in the air, replied, Another way? We're playing a death game based entirely on chance. This doesn't surprise me at all. Without hesitation, Yun picked up the gun, pointed it at his head, and pulled the trigger. Click. Silence. His breath caught in his throat as he let out a nervous chuckle. Phew, that was close, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Now, it was the Viking's turn. As the gun was passed to him, the girl screamed in frustration. This game is unfair. Isn't the God game supposed to be about choosing the strongest? Why are you using a game of pure luck to decide the champion? Wukong's twisted smile returned, his eyes gleaming. Why? He said, leaning closer. Because it's entertaining. The Viking, undeterred, took the gun, pointed it at his head, and pulled the trigger. Another click. He passed the Glock to the girl, his expression grim but steady. In sheer terror, the girl stalled, but Wukong, growing impatient, threatened her. Shoot, or I'll kill you myself. In a panic, she fired. The room fell silent as her body crumpled to the ground. Wukong clapped, grinning. Well played. 1 down, 2 to go. He handed the gun to Reiyan, who hesitated. Reiyan's mind raced. Something felt wrong. There was no timer, and Wukong hadn't called this the 4th round. This wasn't an official game. It was just for Wukong's amusement. He glared at Wukong. You gods are too cruel. Activating his divine power, Reiyan focused. Wukong laughed, realizing what Reiyan was doing. If you can see the future, you'll know whether the bullet is in the chamber, Wukong taunted. But no one knows how far you can see. Reiyan paused, then asked, how about a res pin? Wukong, intrigued, grinned. A res pin? Yeah, Reiyan continued, calm but determined. Wouldn't it be more entertaining if the odds were reset each round? Wukong laughed again. Agreeing, he spun the chamber and handed the gun back to Reiyan. You're right. This is more fun. Reiyan, sweat pouring down his face, pointed the gun at Yun. Looks like your eyes can see more than last time, Yun remarked, understanding Reiyan's ability had evolved. Suddenly, Reiyan turned the gun toward Wukong. The gods above watched in anticipation. Wukong's grin vanished. Do you understand what you're doing? Of course, Reiyan replied coldly, pulling the trigger. The chamber clicked, but no bullet fired. Before Wukong could react, Vidar lunged forward, delivering a crushing punch that sent Wukong flying. Yun, impressed, followed up with a brutal kick, sending Wukong crashing out of the room and into a waterfall. That felt good, Yun said, satisfied. Glad you caught on to my plan, Reiyan. Though victorious, Yun's eyes darkened. But this doesn't change the fact that you're still my enemy. The three stood together, looking like warriors about to face their greatest challenge. Yun cracked his knuckles. We've got a god to kill. Meanwhile, in the realm of the gods, murmurs filled the hall. One of the gods turned to the others and asked, Do you want to know about Reiyan? God continued, his voice low and thoughtful. I'll admit, part of me fears him. Do you know why? I've seen his future. It's my duty to stop it from becoming a reality. Before he could elaborate further, Asura interrupted the conversation. Apologies for interrupting, but the third round has finished. It seems 4 participants have gone missing from the god game, Asura said, commanding the room with his presence. Back to the place where Reiyan is there. Even in the tense moment, Reiyan couldn't help but think, this guy is too cool. When he sees Yun kick Wukong. Meanwhile, Wukong emerged from the waterfall, shaking off the water and summoning his staff. Finally, the riffraff are dead. A chance for revenge on the gods, he snarled. His eyes locked on Reiyan. Hope your eyes can keep up with me. Yun wasted no time, charging at Wukong with a punch, but the monkey god dodged effortlessly, leaving Yun shocked at his speed. As Wukong was about to grab Yun, Reiyan reacted quickly, firing the Glock. Wukong narrowly dodged the shot, and the Viking charged in, slamming Wukong with a powerful blow that sent water splashing everywhere. But, as expected, Wukong dodged again. Wukong transformed into a fly, darting toward Reiyan, clearly recognizing him as the biggest threat due to his ability to see the future. Without breaking a sweat, Reiyan dodged the attack, leaving Wukong surprised. Yun quickly followed up, appearing out of nowhere with a kick aimed at Wukong, who managed to block it but was still sent flying into a nearby hill. You okay? Yun asked, glancing at Reiyan. Yeah, Reiyan replied. But if we want to get out of here alive, we need to be transparent. I don't know if the Viking will cooperate, but sticking together is our best bet. I know everyone in the god game wants to keep their powers hidden, but I'll do whatever it takes to survive. Reiyan took a deep breath. So, I'll tell you the secret of my power, he began, explaining his divine power. My divine power is omniscience. It lets me see up to 15 seconds into the future. But here's the thing. Knowing the future inherently changes it. If I act differently because I've seen the future itself shifts. For example, when I aimed the gun at you, Yun, I saw the outcome. I also saw the outcome if I aimed it at myself. In other words, my eyes can see any path in the future that I want. Wukong, still recovering, glared at them, clearly furious that they were strategizing mid-battle. What are you two whispering about? He shouted. Yun, clearly impressed, grinned. Wow, we really got lucky with our powers, huh? I mean, we're kind of overpowered. Reiyan smiled. I guess so. Suddenly, the Viking slapped Reiyan across the back. Stop screwing around. We're in the middle of a battle, he barked. Reiyan turned to him. Will you at least follow my lead? The Viking scowled. Get lost. Reiyan sighed to himself. If this guy doesn't listen to me, any future where I adjust his movements becomes inaccessible, he thought. Despite the tension, the three of them stood together, ready for whatever came next, each of them emanating a powerful and cool energy, as if preparing for the final act. Reiyan glanced at Yun. Looks like it's up to us then. Yun, still keeping his usual grin, responded, just warn me if anything bad happens, yeah? Without warning, Wukong charged at them, sneering. You cocky bastards really think you can stand a chance against me? I am a god. With a burst of energy, Wukong activated a spell, the spell of binding, locking the Viking in place. Viking, unfazed by the magic restraining him, still roared and rushed toward Wukong. You damned monkey, he bellowed, fighting against the bindings. Meanwhile, Reiyan and Yun attacked Wukong in unison. Reiyan's fists connected with lightning speed, each strike landing with precision, while Yun moved swiftly, circling Wukong, ready to strike. The air was thick with the sound of Reiyan's punches hitting their target, a relentless barrage of blows against the god. But Wukong's defense remained unyielding. In a quick move, Reiyan tossed the revolver to Yun, who prepared to fire. But before Yun could take the shot, Wukong lunged at him, throwing a powerful punch. Fear shot through Yun's mind, his thoughts racing. I can't keep up. Just as the blow was about to land, Reiyan tackled Yun out of the way, saving him. Wukong, furious, growled, "Those annoying eyes of yours keep ruining all the fun." His malicious grin grew as he activated his 72 transformations, changing his form into a massive Dumbo-like elephant and crashing down on both of them. At the last second, Reiyan and Yun managed to dodge the enormous elephant, narrowly escaping. The impact of Wukong's transformation left the ground trembling beneath them. Yun, catching his breath, thought to himself, as I am now, I can't keep up with him. He clenched his fists, realizing that it was time to stop holding back. No longer willing to hide his true strength, Yun decided to reveal his divine power. With a surge of energy, Yun's form shifted as he activated his twin storm ability. The air around him crackled with power, and his eyes gleamed with a new intensity. In that moment, he looked as formidable as a god himself. Wukong looked at Yun with a gleam of recognition in his eyes. The storm gods, Raijin and Fujin, both of them chose you, huh? Reiyan, eager to support, spoke up. I'll back you up. But Yun, without missing a beat, replied, No offense, Reiyan, but don't bother. You can't keep up. Wukong, brimming with confidence, sneered, Your speed is nothing to brag about, kid. But in an instant, Yun appeared right in front of him, delivering a powerful kick to Wukong's chin. The monkey god staggered back, utterly confused. How did he just get so fast? Wukong's mind raced, realizing Yun's speed had increased eightfold. He tried to strike back, but Yun effortlessly dodged, delivering another kick to Wukong's face, sending him flying. Charging up a powerful blast, Yun unleashed a glowing yellow wave of energy at Wukong. Reiyan, watching in awe, could barely believe it. So this is Yun's true strength. Wukong got up, dusting himself off without a scratch. You're fast, I'll give you that, Wukong admitted. But you'll need to hit a lot harder if you plan on killing a god. He grinned wickedly. Though for a mortal, you're one of the most impressive I've seen. In the blink of an eye, Wukong was suddenly beside Yun. Perhaps I need to step it up too, he said, grabbing Yun by the face and slamming him into the ground with terrifying force. I've heard that in your entire existence, only one person has ever managed to land a blow on you. Wukong continued, his voice dripping with malice. Let me be the second. Yun lay there, dazed, as flashes of his past flickered in his mind. He had always been treated as an abomination because of the scar on his face. The scar had made him an outcast, someone to be feared and ridiculed at school. But he had made a decision long ago, to never let anyone hurt him again. One day, Yun had hospitalized 17 of his classmates, all of whom had once tormented him. In a world divided between winners and losers, the strong and the weak, Yun had sworn to stand at the top. No one would ever lay a hand on him. until he found the one who gave him that scar. Back in the present, Yun's eyes burned red with rage. A massive explosion of energy erupted from where he stood, shaking the ground. Wukong's excitement grew, a gleam of anticipation in his eyes. So, there's more to you after all. Yun, now radiating power, stood tall, his expression grim. I spent a lifetime being untouchable because of a promise I made to myself. And then you ruined it. His voice was steady but filled with fury. Tell me, Wukong, if a man is so powerful that he's untouchable for a lifetime, how many gods do you think have tried to sponsor me? Wukong's mind raced. How many gods? He wondered. He stood in shock as Yun continued, Don't worry, I'll tell you the answer. 9 gods have sponsored me. Yun's voice grew colder. To be undefeated in life and death, I'm the best candidate to win the god game. His statement left everyone stunned, their eyes widening in disbelief. In the silence, Yun's paper was revealed, stating, Yun, age 25, refuses to be hurt until he murders his father. Yun turned back to Wukong, his gaze unyielding. Before I kill you, I'll give you one last chance to answer my question. What color are my eyes? Without waiting for a response, Yun used his earth power to bind Wukong in place. Then, combining his aquatic power with his electrical abilities, he delivered a quick but powerful electric shock. Wukong's body convulsed as he fought against the restraints, clearly not enjoying the electric bath. With powers like these, Wukong thought to himself, this bastard stands on the same level as the gods. Using his staff, Wukong broke free of the water's hold. Plucking some hair from his head, he blew on it, creating clones of himself. The battlefield suddenly multiplied with shadowy figures. Clones? Yun said in confusion, his brow furrowed. Reiyan thought, these aren't illusions like the Hitins. Wukong smirked. You really think I'd let you get close to me? Yun gritted his teeth, annoyed. I don't care about these fakes. The only one I want to kill is you. With that, Yun unleashed one of his divine powers, Dante's Inferno, sending a powerful burst of flame toward Wukong. But before the flames could engulf him, Wukong appeared behind Yun, throwing a punch that Yun barely dodged in time. Fast, Yun thought, narrowly escaping the blow. Reiyan, watching the exchange, realized something critical. Wukong's clones, they have the same durability as his actual body. Yun, unfazed by the clones, rushed at Wukong, determined to finish it. The two clashed in a flurry of punches, their strikes connecting with each other's faces. Yun was thrown back because of the impact. He somehow managed to find his footing and looked at Wukong. Is that all you've got? Wukong spat out blood for the first time in the battle, his eyes narrowing. I can't remember the last time I bled like this, he muttered, summoning even more clones. Reiyan called out to Yun, Stop! We need to stick to the strategy, just like we planned. But Yun, his rage consuming him, shouted back, This monkey made me break my promise. I'll be the one to kill him. Reiyan's eyes narrowed. Yun's not thinking straight. He's not listening. If we're going to win, I need to find a way to use the strongest man here. But what path in the future will let me do that? Reiyan quickly scanned the battlefield, then made his move. He drew the gun and, to everyone's shock, pointed it at Vidar, who was still trapped by Wukong's spell. Everyone stared at Reiyan as he pointed the gun at Vidar, confusion and disbelief in their eyes. What the hell is he doing? They all seemed to think. Reiyan smirked, whispering to himself, choosing the right future. He fired, not at Vidar directly, but at the magical binding that held him. The spell shattered, and Vidar was freed. Vidar, now standing tall, looked at Reiyan in awe. How did you know that would work? He asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Reiyan simply smiled. I've seen this future. Reiyan smirked, answering Vidar. I remember earlier, Wukong's attention was on the gun. Why would a god be concerned about a normal gun? If you're truly a god, why dodge an ordinary bullet? I foresaw the future where I used it to free you. Vidar gave a small nod of approval. Not bad. Maybe you're not as useless as I thought. Wukong, now visibly annoyed, plucked out more hair and blew it into the air. Who cares if you freed Vidar? he said with a sneer. "You've used your last bullet, and the three of you can barely handle one of me. Let's see how you fare against 50. With a malicious grin, Wukong summoned 50 clones of himself, the battlefield instantly becoming chaotic. Yun was about to make a move, but Reiyan stopped him, eyes focused. "I see it, who Vidar truly is." Vidar stepped forward, his presence commanding as he raised his hand. "Let me handle this." With a calm, almost casual motion, Vidar unleashed his divine power, the Hand of God. With a single clap, an immense shockwave rippled through the air, instantly vaporizing all 50 of Wukong's clones from existence. The battlefield fell silent, the landscape before them completely decimated. Yun stood in disbelief, asking, "What does this guy eat for breakfast?" His eyes were wide as he surveyed the destruction. He just pulled a Hulk smash move. Now I understand why Shinjin said Vidar is the strongest. Reiyan's mind raced, piecing it all together. The Hand of God. So Vidar's not just some brute. His eyes widened with realization. He's a god candidate. Yun, still stunned, turned to Reiyan. "Wait, Vidar's a god himself?" Reiyan nodded. "Not just that. I remember what Cthulhu said. Something about divine participants. Vidar is the deity Cthulhu was talking about." Yun crossed his arms. "That's just unfair." Reiyan chuckled. "This game hasn't exactly been fair from the start." Vidar, turning to them with a serious expression, interrupted. "Enough messing around. It's not over yet." Up above, Wukong, now sitting on his flying cloud, laughed darkly. "You almost had me there," he said, his voice echoing across the battlefield. A Norse deity of vengeance with a god for a sponsor, a nearly untouchable champion with 9 divine powers, and an irritating bastard who can see the future. He sneered, his tone laced with malice. "I was so excited to choose one of you as my champion, but now I can't wait to slaughter all of you." Reiyan glanced at Yun and Vidar, his voice calm but filled with determination. "I've got a plan to take him down, but I need both of you to follow my lead." Vidar narrowed his eyes, his massive frame tensing. "Don't make me regret trusting you," he growled. Yun nodded, a faint smirk on his face. "Sorry about earlier, but if the big guy's in, then I guess I've got to be a team player. As long as we put this monkey 6 feet under." The dead girl's body remained motionless in the background as Reiyan gave one final look at his companions. "Trust me, stick to the plan, and we'll make it out alive." Above them, Wukong, perched on his cloud, chuckled darkly. "We'll see about that," he sneered, his smile twisted with malice. The battle erupted again. Vidar's fist connected with Wukong's chest, sending the god crashing into the distance. "We got him," Yun shouted. "Keep hitting him. An opening will come." "We can't hold back," Reiyan added, his voice sharp. "If we don't finish him now, we're all dead." But Wukong returned, laughing maniacally. "This is what I live for. The thrill of dancing with death, that fear crawling up your spine. Doesn't it make your blood boil?" Then, with terrifying speed, Wukong tore through them. His strikes landed with crushing force, leaving Reiyan, Yun, and Vidar barely able to keep up. They could only watch in horror as Wukong became stronger, faster, and more brutal. Reiyan aimed the gun at Wukong, seeing a brief window to strike. But before he could act, Wukong was already there, grinning like a predator. "You think I didn't see this coming?" he laughed, delivering a bone-crushing kick to Reiyan. "What are you gonna do with an empty gun, puppet master?" With another brutal strike, Wukong sent Reiyan flying, the gun clattering across the room. "Just like that, your pathetic hope vanishes," Wukong sneered, stepping toward Reiyan. "I think I'll kill you first, brat. You think you can manipulate your friends like puppets with your precious foresight? It seems your eyes couldn't see this far, could they?" Reiyan wiped the blood from his lip, a confident smirk forming. "Here's the thing about puppeteers," he said, his voice low but dangerous. "We don't need to be in the spotlight." Suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the room. The girl, once thought dead, stood tall, the gun smoking in her hands. Wukong's eyes went wide as the bullet tore into him. "Surprised?" she said, her voice steady. I'm the champion of the god of death. As long as I'm strong, I'll keep getting back up. Wukong stumbled, clutching his wound, his confusion turning to rage. You were playing dead this whole time? He stammered. The girl smirked. I used my divine power, hours. You thought I was dead? Wrong. I just needed a little time. Reiyan, standing up slowly, looked Wukong dead in the eyes. This is the future I saw. Wukong, still bleeding and barely holding himself up, realized too late. You forced me to disarm you. That was your plan the whole time, to get the gun to her. Reiyan stepped forward, his gaze cold. That's right. Even with an empty gun, you were already dead. Reiyan smirked, his eyes gleaming with calculated confidence. That's right. I knew the only way to defeat you was with the pistol. The bullets, each one powerful enough to kill a god, even someone like Vidar. But as long as you thought the gun was dangerous, your guard was up. So I wasted the other bullets, testing them, confirming they weren't ordinary, that they could destroy even divine power. And once I made you believe you were safe, I set the last bullet in motion, the one in her head. Wukong's grin faltered, but he forced a laugh. But how? How could you possibly have known about her divine power? You've never met before this round? Reiyan's smile only grew. My divine power, omniscience, lets me glimpse any future path I choose. Back during Russian roulette, I looked into several possible futures. In one of them, I checked to see if she was alive. That's why I yelled so loudly. If we don't defeat him now, we're all finished. It wasn't just to motivate my team. I was hoping the fear of death would wake her up. Wukong staggered but pushed himself to his feet, a dark glint returning to his eyes. Well, looks like everything played out just like you planned. How clever of you, he sneered. But there's just one problem. You should have aimed for the head. In a flash, Wukong dashed at them with terrifying speed. Yun's face lit up with excitement. Actually, this is perfect. Now we get to deliver the finishing blow. But before they could react, the battlefield was consumed by a sudden, overwhelming force. Every god appeared out of nowhere, descending with divine power and forcing Wukong to the ground. The contestants found themselves immobilized, unable to move. A powerful voice boomed through the air. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? The air grew thick with tension as the voice of God echoed again, dripping with disappointment. I am disappointed, Sun Wukong. Despite your endless rebellion, I gave you another chance. But now, my patience has run dry. Wukong's defiance faltered as he lay pinned beneath the god's overwhelming presence, powerless for the first time in ages. Since his inception, Wukong's drive for freedom had been relentless. After being bound for so long, he knew only one thing. He wanted to break free and live his immortal life on his own terms. He fought again and again, pushing himself beyond his limits. And when he finally thought he had won his freedom, it was snatched away. A new divine presence appeared, one that conquered the pantheon effortlessly. This being's power seemed infinite. Even the immortal gods were enslaved to him. Wukong often wondered why he kept fighting. In the end, nothing changed. He was still a prisoner. Back in the present, God looked down at Wukong, his voice cold and final. After centuries of leniency, I've grown tired of trying to tame you. Yun, ever the Joker, interrupted. Where are all the cute goddesses at? His comment irritated one of the gods, and the Egyptian deity sneered, turning his attention to Vidar. How's the game going? You must be desperate to ally yourself with mortals. Vidar snapped. Shut up, Mutt. The Egyptian god smirked. Huh, Mutt? But you're the one barking. Tension crackled between the two as they barked insults at one another. Yura stepped forward and asked God, should I transport the contestants while you handle this? God, his eyes locked on Wukong, shook his head. No, I want them to watch. This is what happens when you oppose me. With a snap of his fingers, God summoned Wukong's closest friends, the ones he considered family. Wukong's heart dropped. No, please, he begged, desperation clawing at his voice. But God was unmoved. With a flick of his hand, he killed them without hesitation. Every contestant and god present stood in shock, except Yura, who remained calm. God's voice cut through the silence. Time and time again, you've rebelled. You've forced my hand. Their deaths are your fault. Divine or mortal, all lives belong to me, and I can take them whenever I please. Reiyan, his eyes wide with disbelief, muttered, "Were those gods? If they were, aren't they supposed to be immortal? How did God kill them so easily?" Vidar, his tone grim, replied, "Gods can kill gods, but his power is unlike anything we've ever seen before." Wukong, paralyzed by flashbacks of the past, thought of all he had wanted, freedom. His chest burned with rage. Why did God have to do this? In a burst of fury, Wukong broke free from the gods restraining him, charging at God with unmatched speed. A Zeus-like figure hurled a lightning bolt at him, but Wukong caught it midair and threw it back, leaving the god stunned. Two other gods rushed at Wukong, but he used his clones to confuse them. His voice rang out, filled with defiance and anger. "How long will you let him rule over you? Centuries? Millennia? Our pantheon ruled the heavens peacefully before his arrival, yet we grovel before him like worshippers. But I've had enough. Today, I will erase him from history." God, unimpressed, barely glanced at Wukong. "Yura," he said calmly, "take the participants out of here." Yura bowed slightly before turning to the contestants. "Apologies for the inconvenience. Wukong will be punished." With a clap of his fingers, the participants began to vanish, transported out of the battle. "Please rest in the waiting room and await further instructions," Yura continued as they disappeared. God looked down at Wukong, a smirk playing on his lips. "What a shame. I enjoyed this realm." Turning to Yura, he added, "Remove the other divinities. Wukong will be erased from existence." Yura turned to God and said, "Try not to destroy any other realms in the process." With that, Yura teleported himself and the other gods away from the battlefield, leaving Wukong and God alone. Wukong, still defiant, looked at God with a wild grin. "Thank you for finally giving me the duel I've been waiting for. But calling away your pawns was your biggest mistake. Who's going to stop me now?" His voice held both excitement and fury. "Ever since that day, I've dreamed of this chance. The day I would do what the other gods wouldn't. The day I'd oppose your unruly presence and restore balance." Wukong began to transform, his body glowing with immense power as he prepared for a death battle against God. Meanwhile, Reiyan and the others were suddenly teleported to an unfamiliar place. Dazed, Reiyan asked, "Where are we?" Yun glanced around and replied, "At least they kept us together." Then, turning to the girl who had played dead earlier, he asked, "What should we do with her? She played dead the whole time just to save herself. Do we trust her? Or should we get rid of her now and save ourselves the trouble?" The girl, defensive, said, "Of course you can trust me. I helped defeat Wukong. If I hadn't played dead, you would have never caught him off guard." Yun remained unconvinced, and Reiyan turned to Vidar for guidance. "Should we trust her?" Vidar's voice was cold as he answered, "Her sponsor is death, so she has multiple lives. She could be useful, but trustworthy? I doubt it. All mortals are deceitful, and this game brings out their worst." Reiyan, sensing the tension, tried to ease the situation. "No arguing. We're all just a little on edge after what happened." With a calm and raised voice, he asked the girl, "What's your name?" The girl, hesitant, answered, "It's Iya." Reiyan offered his hand. "Nice to meet you, Iya. Thanks for helping us earlier. Let's get through this together." As Iya reached out to shake his hand, she noticed something unsettling, Reiyan's aura. She began to sweat, realizing the intense power he radiated. With a serious, almost piercing look, Reiyan pointed toward a building in the distance. "It looks like the waiting room for this round is over there." He started heading toward it. Yun, shrugging, added, "Let's go. I could use a break." Suddenly, Iya stopped Reiyan, her voice shaky. What was that aura just now?" Reiyan shot her a bombastic side-eye and answered coolly, "A warning." His gaze hardened. "I see through this facade of yours. It won't work on me. I see your future. I know your type. always looking out for yourself, betraying others when it suits you. Reiyan continued, his voice unwavering. Why play solo? The god game is dangerous, and with every round, teamwork becomes more essential. You'll never get far on your own. As they reached the waiting room, other contestants came out to greet them. Era, overjoyed, ran toward Reiyan and jumped into his arms. I thought Wukong separated us, or worse. I thought something had happened to you. Reiyan reassured Era, Don't worry, Era. I'm okay. I'm just glad you guys are safe. As he spoke, Shinjin approached, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. Hey, what the hell happened to you? Shinjin asked, noticing something different about Reiyan. Reiyan sighed. It's a long story. Shinjin studied him for a moment before saying, You seem different. Reiyan chuckled. Really? I wonder what you think has changed. He turned and gestured toward the others. But first, I want to introduce you to my new friends, he said, pointing at Yoon, Vidar, and Era. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Wukong, in his Ultra Instinct form, being flung across the battlefield. He landed on his flying cloud, clutching his bleeding stomach. God watched him impassively and said, Is this all the infamous Monkey King can muster? Or did those tiny mortals wound you too badly? Wukong grinned, wild and defiant. For someone who doesn't talk much, you sure yap a lot of nonsense, he growled. Wukong extended his staff and slammed it down toward God, but God effortlessly blocked the attack. I knew you'd be too arrogant to dodge, Wukong muttered before appearing beneath God with a swarm of his clones. God, unimpressed, destroyed the clones with a single-hand Kamehameha. Suddenly, Wukong appeared behind him and delivered a crushing punch, sending God flying with a broken face. If you thought I was fighting those mortals seriously, you're wrong, Wukong smirked. All I wanted was to interact with Reiyan, the boy who has God's eyes. He continued, After all, how can you see the future of someone who also sees the future? Anyone who crosses paths with him can escape your all-seeing eyes. I knew you'd come after me, but without your omniscience, I think I have a chance. God, with his cracked face, responded coldly, It seems Buddha was right. For a primate, you're witty, but it doesn't matter. God raised his hand, summoning a massive hand from the sky. The sheer force of the wind sent Wukong stumbling backward. Wukong, gritting his teeth, said, This isn't the hand of God, because Vidar was using that. This power, it's the hand of Buddha. God smiled. It's poetic, isn't it? The only power capable of sealing you will now be your demise. With rage burning in his eyes, Wukong roared, I don't know how you got Buddha's power, but he'd never give it to someone like you. He grew 4 additional arms, his form growing more fearsome. It doesn't matter how many gods grovel before you, or how powerful you've become. I stand by my word. I reject your divine rule. God, with an emotionless gaze, responded, Then be erased from history. The colossal hand, now visible from outer space, began its descent, crushing down toward Wukong. The ground beneath him cracked, and lava erupted as Wukong struggled to hold the hand up, his body buckling under its immense weight. But, inch by inch, he managed to lift it, defying all odds. God stared in confusion. How is Wukong lifting the hand of Buddha? He muttered. Knowing he wouldn't survive, Wukong made a final decision. I hereby declare and bestow my divine power upon a new champion. Reiyan Asura, he shouted, his voice echoing across the battlefield. As he said this, Wukong's body sank deeper into the lava that had formed beneath him. You dare choose him as your champion? God said, glaring at Wukong, who was slowly being consumed by the molten earth. Wukong, even as he was sinking, thought to himself, I don't care. Even in my last moments, I fought for the freedom I always sought, and if anyone can achieve it, I believe it's Reiyan. As the hand crashed onto the planet, completely destroying it, the scene shifted back to Reiyan, who was shown crying, just like all of us witnessing the Monkey King's final sacrifice. Thank you for watching. If you want me to continue this series, please let me know in the comments. Also, please do not forget to like and subscribe. Till then, cheers.